Let me begin by reaffirming the principles that guide Singapore's position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We have consistently advocated for a negotiated two-state solution that is consistent with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, because we believe this is a way for Israelis and Palestinians to live side by side in peace and security. In fact, this is the only viable path for achieving a comprehensive, a just, and a durable solution to this conflict. We have also consistently supported the right of the Palestinian people to a homeland. In 1988, the Palestinian Liberation Organization issued a proclamation on the State of Palestine, which affirmed the UN's partition of the mandate of Palestine into an Arab and a Jewish state, as well as the PLO's decision to renounce violence against Israel. We welcomed this proclamation back in 1988 because the PLO had therefore explicitly rejected terrorism and recognized the right of the State of Israel to exist. We saw these moves as progress towards a durable solution. On the 18th of April 2024, a UN Security Council resolution that recommended that Palestine be admitted for membership to the UN was vetoed. On the 10th of May 2024, the General Assembly took up a resolution expressing support for Palestine's membership in the United Nations and recommended that the Security Council reconsider this matter favorably. Singapore voted in favor of this resolution after very careful consideration, and this reflected our hope to encourage both Israel and Palestine to resume direct negotiations towards a two-state solution at a time when, in fact, the prospects for such negotiations were increasingly bleak. We therefore decided to join the majority of the international community in supporting this resolution, which is also in line with our long-standing support for the principles of international law and for the implementation of all relevant UN Security Council resolutions. Our vote at the United Nations General Assembly means that Singapore is prepared in principle to recognize the State of Palestine. We will make this move at an appropriate time. Our key consideration is that such a move on our part should help progress towards peace and a negotiated two-state solution. In particular, there will need to be an effective Palestinian government that accepts Israel's right to exist and categorically rejects terrorism. Both sides have legitimate rights, and both peoples have a right to live in peace and dignity within secure borders. We urge both sides to seize the moment to take steps towards a long-lasting peace and to put an end to the suffering that has gone on for far too long. Ultimately, Israelis and Palestinians will need to exercise leadership and will have to work together to forge a better future for their peoples. As Singapore is a friend to both, Singapore will continue to offer our encouragement and our tangible support to both Palestinians and Israelis. So Singapore will continue our engagement with the Palestinian Authority. We will continue to implement our $10 million enhanced technical assistance package to help the Palestinian Authority build capacity and to prepare for ultimate statehood. To date, we have trained more than 750 Palestinian officials in a variety of areas, including diplomacy, water management, economic management, urban planning. These are important, vital areas that any government will need to have the necessary expertise in. During my most recent visit to Ramallah in March this year, Prime Minister of Palestine, Mohammed Mustafa, expressed his appreciation for our long-standing technical assistance, and in fact, he sought further capacity building support, especially in civil service training and in digitalization. I welcomed his interests in these areas, and I said that Singapore will do our best to respond. As a follow-up, there will be a course on transforming public service with the power of artificial intelligence, which we will conduct for Palestinian Authority officials later this month. We will also provide a fully funded scholarships for Palestinian officials to pursue postgraduate studies in our local universities. And 3 Palestinian officials have already been awarded scholarships this year, I think in accountancy, in international political economy, and in Infocom's security. We hope that these training opportunities will help the Palestinian Authority officials better serve the Palestinian people, as well as equip them with the necessary skills when it comes to the eventual reconstruction of Gaza. On Mr. Faisal Manap's specific question on training Palestinian officials to aid in the reconstruction of Gaza, let me just state that Singapore will assess how best we can help bilaterally and, in fact, as part of a multilateral effort. I remain in close and constant contact with all my counterparts in the Middle East on this issue. Singapore participated in a conference co-hosted by King Abdullah II of Jordan, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on the 11th of June this year to discuss the humanitarian response to Gaza. We stand ready to contribute, taking into account Gaza's needs and in account of our own resources and expertise. But clearly, all this can only take effect when the fighting ceases. For now, the focus has to be on securing an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza and the release of all hostages immediately.
Mr. Jerogam.
I thank the Minister for his answers. So what would be the thresholds that need to be crossed for Singapore to recognize the state of Palestine? And specifically, would it happen only when a two-state solution is negotiated and concluded? If so, this is no different from Singapore's previous position. Secondly, does the Minister agree that the formal recognition of Palestine statehood by Singapore and other countries which have close relations with Israel, like Spain, Ireland, and Norway, would be a significant statement of unequivocal support for a two-state solution and will give impetus to advancing the moribund peace process? And lastly, would the Minister agree that the recognition of Palestine would allow for negotiations to proceed on a more equal footing between 2 recognized states, the State of Israel and the State of Palestine, rather than one state negotiating with a non-state entity?
Minister Balakrishnan.
I thank Mr. Giam for the question. In fact, I thank him for accompanying me on my trip to the Middle East in March. Let me reiterate that we are prepared, in principle, to recognize Palestine. And the principal consideration is when we do this, will it be helpful or will it hinder the progress towards peace? And which in turn, in fact, depends on negotiations between both sides. But a key point, you mentioned equal. But a key point and a key question which every single country that is pondering this question has to decide: is there an effective Palestinian government or leadership who represents all Palestinians, which has effective control over, at a minimum, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and has the mandate, has the authority to negotiate with the Israelis on behalf of the Palestinians? And quite frankly, I think every other country in the world will have to grapple with this same question, but will arrive at an answer probably at a different threshold or a different point in time. And frankly, it will also depend on their own domestic circumstances. So I would say that we are not going to lock ourselves in to a specific time or to whether or not other countries have made decisions in parallel on the same fundamental question. All right, so let me summarize again. We are prepared in principle to recognize the state of Palestine, but we want to do so at an appropriate moment when it is helpful, and you must have an effective Palestinian government, and one which, as I alluded to earlier, which must categorically renounce terrorism and must accept the right of Israel to exist. Within those parameters, I look forward to progress. I don't know exactly when that will happen, but I certainly look forward to progress.
Mr. Zulkarnain Rahim.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the Honourable Minister for the response to my question. Two SQs. Firstly, the recognition of state is not merely a diplomatic exercise. It entails legal implications as well. Under international law, there are conditions for the recognition of a statehood. So has the Ministry conferred or with the AG and MINLAW to assess whether Singapore would be ready to recognize a particular state and whether that state fulfills those conditions of being recognized as a state under international law, because it has repercussions on international treaties and other enforcement of court orders. The second SQ is this, and with Minister, we visited the offices, our offices in the Ramallah representative office, and met participants from the ETAP batches, and they are all very thankful for the Singapore government's support. My question is this: if Singapore recognizes the Palestinian state right now, what kind of further support to the Palestinian Authority that Singapore can provide, which we have not already provided or unable to provide right now? Thank you.
Minister.
Well, likewise, I thank MP Mr. Zul for accompanying me, and you were in Ramallah with me, and when we had the discussions with the Palestinian Authority leadership, including the graduates of our ETAP program. Let me answer your second question first. We intend to continue all our assistance packages. We intend to also look for opportunities to do more. And quite frankly, the level of support that we provide to the Palestinian Authority will not depend upon whether or not there is formal recognition or not, or indeed what happens even on the international stage. You will know, in fact, all of you will know, even without that formal status, the Palestinian Prime Minister has visited Singapore. Our Prime Minister, or then Prime Minister, Lee Hsien Loong, has been to Ramallah. Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean and I have, and Second Minister Maliki have made numerous trips to Ramallah. So the point I want to assure you is that the interactions, the support, the assistance that we provide to the Palestinian Authority is not subject to the other political and diplomatic interactions. Now, let me come to your first question. And actually, the formal recognition of statehood is not just a diplomatic question or just a legal question. More specifically, in the case of Palestine, as the situation currently subsists, you can make legal arguments both ways, whether or not they fulfill the 4 criteria of the Montevideo principles of statehood. Permanent people, defined boundaries, effective government, able to transact, enter treaties. You can make legal arguments both ways. Ultimately, we believe this is a political question, and therefore it will be subject to the political considerations of the different entities that are trying to engage the Palestinian people. In the case of Singapore, I said our principal consideration is that we have always believed in a negotiated 2-state solution. We believe that the Palestinian people have a right to a homeland. We will continue to support the Palestinian people and the nascent Palestinian Authority, which, certainly in the case of the PLO, which constitutes the key, I would say, the key pillar of the current Palestinian Authority, which accepts Israel's right to exist and which has renounced terrorism. And you were there in the room when I had these discussions with numerous Palestinian Authority leaders who all reaffirm these points. So we really have no problem with the Palestinian Authority. But I think, let's be frank about it, the situation in Gaza is far more problematical. And the people that we spoke to and we engaged in Ramallah have tenuous, or in fact, almost zero input into the situation in Gaza. Nevertheless, let us be helpful, let us be constructive, let us be consistent. Let's not engage in performative gestures. Let's engage in constructive, direct assistance to the people of Palestine who need, and as you have noticed, appreciate our support.
Mr. Leong Manuai.
Thank you, Speaker. I have 2 questions for the Minister. First question, what is our total official aid given to the Palestinians over the last 10 years? Second question, which is also one of my written question actually, has our country made any defense sales, such as weapons or any other material, that can cause harm to civilians to Israel since 7 October 2023? Thank you.
Minister Balakrishnan.
I don't have the total aid provided to Palestine over the past 10 years. As I said in my earlier answer, we obviously have the 10 million enhanced technical assistance package. We have scholarships. I haven't computed the value of the scholarships, and we intend to give more. We have delivered 3 tranches of humanitarian assistance so far, including deploying the RSAF to airdrop, I think, at least 20 tons to the Gaza in March. We are contemplating a 4th tranche. I should also say that the fundraising from Singaporeans, and I want to give a special shout out to Ramatan Al Alamin, I think we have collectively raised at least $15.5 million so far. So I'm giving you figures which, frankly, are all within less than 1 calendar year. If you really want the total for 10 years, you can submit a separate question later on. Now, let me deal with your question on arms. And let me give you a very careful and proper answer to this. Singapore complies strictly with our international obligations on international arms sales, as well as UN sanctions and embargoes against any country, including submitting regular reports to the UN Register of Convention Arms, which is a public record which you can access for yourself. Apart from this, it is the established policy of the government not to publicly divulge any details of defense sales for national security reasons.
Ms. Mariam Jaffa.
Sir, I thank the Minister for his response on the considerations for when we would recognize Palestinian statehood, and also further thank the government for, I think, the very tangible things they are doing to actually prepare for that, to prepare the government for that. I have just one SQ. Can the Minister share more on any diplomatic efforts that we are currently taking with international and regional bodies, like the UN, where a vote has been taken in favor of Palestinian memberhood, the EU, out of which 10 out of 27 states now formally recognize Palestine, and ASEAN, our closest neighbors, to facilitate the realization of the Palestinian state, a two-state solution, and to secure the legal and diplomatic rights of Palestine after this conflict is over?
We are approaching the end of question time, so I'll request Minister to address that, and I see a few more hands, so let's keep all the answers and questions short. Minister.
I thank the member for the question. We are trying our best bilaterally on the basis of our relationship with Israel, our relationship with all the Middle East stakeholders, as well as consulting closely with our ASEAN partners and other partners around the world. But I just want to emphasize again, we are not the determinative factor. This is a long-standing conflict. I honestly don't know how and when it will end. And my focus is not to add fuel to the fire, but to be quietly, discreetly, constructively helpful to the people at a humanitarian level, and to build up capacity, specifically with respect to the Palestinian Authority.
Mr. Giam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief. I think we are dealing, in response to the Minister's answer to my SQ just now, I think we are dealing with a catch-22 situation here. Most people will agree that an effective Palestinian government that governs the entire territory is still in the works. However, if we are waiting for a viable and effective Palestinian state to exist before recognizing it, it might never happen under current realities. Minister said that one key principle guiding our actions is whether it can bring forward the peace process. Therefore, does the Minister agree that Singapore's recognition of Palestine will help, even in some small way, to bring forward the peace process and negotiations, or will it hurt the process?
Minister.
I know Mr. Giam is sincere in this, but I would point out that even in your question, there are two different dimensions to it. One, is there an effective Palestinian leadership that speaks for all and that has the mandate to negotiate? That is a separate question from, is there a recognizable Palestinian state? And I'm saying, without locking ourselves in prematurely, which may be unhelpful, I'm saying our long-standing position is that only a negotiated two-state solution will lead to a just, durable, and comprehensive peace. And both sides must recognize the other's right to exist. and must renounce terrorism. Without those prerequisites, never mind the diplomatic and legal niceties, without the recognition and respect of the other's right to exist, and without renouncing terrorism, these cycles of violence will recur. And there will be paroxysms of wars, conflicts, and horrendous humanitarian disasters, which we are witnessing now. So I hope I've explained to everyone here, including the people of Singapore, the principled position and the motivation behind our position. And that's why we do not engage in polemic or in performative gestures or making premature pronouncements, which frankly would be unhelpful. And also be humble enough to know Singapore is a tiny city-state far away, and you've been there. You know the difficulty and complexities of that conflict. And again, another worthwhile reminder for all of us in Singapore. This is fundamentally not our quarrel. This is a family quarrel in another family. The worst thing you can do in a family quarrel is to get involved unnecessarily or with ulterior motives or to perform for an external audience. So let's remain calm, let's remain united, let's remain constructive and helpful, and hope, even in this time of deep darkness, hope that peace will be given a chance in Palestine, and that our Israeli friends and our Palestinian friends, brothers actually, the two of them, can live in peace with each other. For those of you who've accompanied me on my trips, I hope you've noticed that we actually have an unusual and unique privilege, that we're welcomed by all sides. And if you think about that, that's not something you can take for granted. That to be able to be welcomed by all sides, including warring parties, requires a track record of principled, deliberate, careful diplomacy. It doesn't mean agreeing with everyone all the time. But even when we disagree with elements of other people's programs, other people's agenda, they understand why we disagree, and they know that we mean well, and that we're good for our word, and that we're helpful. So that's the attitude in which the government of Singapore approaches this most vexing of disputes, which has gone on for far too long. So finally, let me again reiterate an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and the immediate release of all hostages.